Hello, folks. Welcome to Scratch the Surface. My name's EJ Scott. Today, my guest is Charles Soule. Charles is a fantastic comic book writer, and as it turns out, he's more than that, even. But I'll talk about that in just a second. But for now, I want to give myself a plug. Follow me on Twitter at EJ Scott and the podcast at EJ Podcast. I have a website, ejscott.com. I have a documentary called Running Blind on iTunes and Amazon and Google Play. And for $2 or $3, you can rent it or own it. It's about me. I am losing my eyesight to an eye disease called choroideremia. And in 2012, I ran 12 marathons in 12 states in 12 months, blindfolded to raise money for the Choroideremia Research Foundation. And a really cool documentary was made about it. It's about 30 minutes long, and it's worth your time and $2 if you got it. So go check that out. I'm also still raising money for charity. You could go to crowdrise.com/7on7 and give what you can. I have a list of really cool charities there. And now for Charles Soule. Charles writes for Daredevil, the comic book, and it's really cool because in case you don't know, spoiler alert, Daredevil's blind, and so it means a lot to me that he came on and talked about it. Also, my girlfriend is on the Daredevil TV show on Netflix. It's all connected. We're all connected. It was really cool. And Joe Quesada, who is a bigwig over at Marvel, said for my 40th birthday, which was about a year and a half ago, that I would be written into a Daredevil comic. And it turns out he was not telling a lie. It happened. A few months ago, Charles wrote me into a Daredevil comic. He actually wrote me into about 3 of them. And my character's Officer Scott. I play a cop. So we talk about that. And we talk about a lot of stuff because Charles is also an immigration lawyer. So you could imagine how busy he is these days. We talk a lot about that. He's also a runner. We talk about that. We talk about falling in love with his wife. And, we talk a lot about cool Daredevil stuff. So we talk about, one, the creation of this new character called Muse, which was super creepy. Also, he created a new superhero called Blindspot, and Blindspot is, spoiler alert, a new handicapped superhero, and that's kind of a big deal. That's kind of a big deal. Not many handicapped superheroes out there. So we talk about that, and what else did we talk about? We talked about yes, and we talked about how close he was to bringing back Karen Page to the Marvel Universe in the comics. He wrote it. He wrote a script, he said. And, my girlfriend plays Karen Page on Daredevil, so I was really hoping Karen would come back to the comics. But I had a great talk with Charles. I hope you guys enjoy it. And even if you don't like comics, I think you'll enjoy the talk. And so there you have it. So enjoy my talk with Charles Soule. All right. Hi, Charles.
Hello.
We got you. Are you like ramped up from like running around and trying to get here and stuff? Because you're a little late, but
I am a little late. Thank you for making that the first thing we say on the discussion. I'm late.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you what happened this morning. I know you're a runner. I'm a runner too. I'm not a runner like you're a runner, but it's a huge part of my my mental health almost to make sure that I get a run in. And because the weather's been weird and the sidewalks have been icy and it's just like schedule stuff. So I haven't been able to go since Sunday. And so today was the first day I could get out, and I ran this morning, early. So that's not technically the reason why I'm late, but I ran, had a great run, felt really good. Did not the long ones you do, but it was, probably 5 miles, so it was great.
Yeah.
And then I came back to just sometimes stuff when you step away, stuff starts to pile up in your absence. And so there was this a bunch of kind of things to close an issue of Daredevil, actually. So I had to get all that stuff out the door, and it just sometimes, particularly when you're in a pressure situation and you have to deliver something creative on a really fast timeline. Sometimes it works perfectly, and it's sort of the pressure helps, and other times the pressure does not help at all.
Right.
And that was kind of this morning. So, but anyway, I'm here and we're talking.
Very good.
And
you
it's
should have
okay.
ran here.
That's true.
That would
That's
have
true.
saved time.
Yeah, you're right. I could have been more efficient if I just run here. That's true.
Well, I appreciate you making it out here. I
Sure.
appreciate it. I know you're a very busy guy. I was doing research on you, and you're a lawyer.
I am a lawyer. That's right. I was a lawyer before I got into the comic book writing stuff.
Well, you went to school. You went to law school.
Yeah, that's
You went to two schools. You went to University of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And Columbia.
Exactly. Both fine institutions. And so, I mean, I practiced law for a long, long time. And then when the writing stuff started to take off, I I closed my practice and I sort of stepped away. But in the last couple of weeks, my practice has resurged because there's been a lot of my practice area has been immigration. So there's been a lot of interesting developments recently in the immigration world. And so I've been getting a lot of contacts from clients who, are either very concerned about what's happening in the immigration law world or...
Well, what do you mean what's happening in the immigration law world?
Well, our president, Donald Trump, issued an executive order. I don't know when this is going to air or be online, but...
In 4 years.
In 4 years.
He's out here.
Exactly. All right.
So say what you want.
So as of now, as of this moment, about 2 weeks back, he issued this executive order that drastically curtailed immigration-related rights for individuals from 7 Middle Eastern countries, and up to and including rights affecting green card holders, rights affecting citizens, and some of those things weren't necessarily in the text of the order, but the way that they've been implemented by some of the government agencies who are often, in my experience, they're awesome at doing sort of implementing the law as they see it, but this rule, the way it was drafted, it can have a very broad scope, and so the sort of the limits of it are very ill-defined, and so a lot of immigrants, people who are overseas, lots of people are being affected by this thing, and nobody really understands where it's supposed to stop. So since that's happened, obviously the courts have gotten involved. Some federal courts have said, this is not a legal executive order, so it can't be enforced. But again, that just sort of complicates things because you have people in situations where their rights and what they can expect when they come to a border crossing and all that stuff are very unclear. And this is, if there's any area you want to sort of know what's going to happen to you, it's immigration, because it's things like,
it's about, are you going to be stuck in one place?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Another? Are you going to be away from your family?
Exactly. I have clients, I've gotten calls about clients who, it's a family here, a New York-based family, and then the husband is a researcher. And so he was in Canada, and over the weekend, this ban was implemented, and now he couldn't come back, even though he was a green card holder, and like all these, it was just, and he's like a tenured professor type. So it's, presumably somebody who we really want to have here, a very valuable contributor to the American economy and society. So it's a very complicated situation right now. So I've been doing more immigration work than I've done in a while. Like I've kind of really, taken on more cases than I have in some time, because it seems like a way that I can kind of use a skill set that I have to maybe, help a little, not painting myself as the savior of immigration law, but it's something that at least makes me feel a little bit better and hopefully helps some of my clients a little bit.
Well, do your clients know that you're a busy man writing comic books and you don't have time for this stuff? For this immigration stuff?
Yeah, this immigration stuff, this not important immigration stuff. It's funny because in some of these people I haven't spoken to in years, like it's literally like 5 years, some of the 6 years, some of these people are calling me up now and just to see what's going on. And in that period of time is when all the comic stuff has really surged for me, when my writing has become, like I've become much more writer than a lawyer. And so one of the first things they tend to say is, I looked you up to make sure you were still practicing and like find your phone number. And then I see when I Google you, all I see is this, Daredevil, X-Men, Spider-Man, Superman stuff.
Right.
So the first thing we talk about is, am I going to get deported? But then the second part of it is usually what it's like to be writing all these comics and kind of be in this awesome, weird world.
How are you mentally with all this stuff, like juggling the intense immigration law and then the kind of fun stuff in comics?
Well, I mean, every day's sort of a Every day is a sprint. It used to be, you like a weekend was a concept that I knew and understood. You work until from Monday to Friday, or give or take, and then you have your weekend as kind of you do other things. You sit around, you relax, and now that it's really like my weekends have shrunk to like maybe I get 3 hours here where I don't have anything I have to do right away. So it's something I've chosen all of it. I'm not complaining about it, but it's super intense, and I could see a point down the road where I'm like, oh my god, like I can't, I can't
keep that up.
Yeah, it's a lot. But
How many titles are you writing now?
right now, right now actively so I'm churning out scripts for it, trying to make sure they're great. There are 6.
6 titles.
Six titles that are some have been announced, some haven't. Okay. But there are 6 that I'm like I have to deliver scripts for at least once a month. And then there are other books like say IVX or Uncanny Inhumans, which I finished writing the scripts for, but you still have to do things like a lettering pass or a proof. So I'm still kind of involved with them a little bit. And then I sold my first novel in November, which is amazing.
Right.
Yeah, so Oracle Year. That's right. So I'm super excited about it. Like I couldn't be more excited to finally have a book out, but it's crazy.
Did you write the book?
I wrote it. Yeah, it's done.
Okay, it's done. Okay, I was gonna say, where the hell are you gonna write a book in this time?
No, I know. But even then, like, there's still a whole process. Like I sold it in November, like basically on election day, which was a crazy roller coaster of emotions. But sold it in November, and then you have to. The editor that you're working with gives you their notes, and my editor is fantastic. She's wonderful, and her notes were very on target and sharp. But it still means work to get them through. And then there's like a copy editing pass where sort of you make sure you didn't put apostrophes in the wrong place or try and just trim the lines a little. And then after that, I think there's going to be a whole like PR thing, interviews and stuff.
Right.
And maybe even conventions and things like that. Like I know one of the things, it's sold in a number of foreign countries, which is fantastic. But one of the things that they seem to be very interested in was, will Charles come to like our book fair or our book convention in Brazil or whatever. So I think I will do that. I love traveling places. It's one of my favorite parts of having a writing career is that I get to go all over the world. But it also...
It's time.
Yeah, it's time. It really is time, especially going to someplace like, say, Sao Paulo, which is...
Far.
Yeah, it's far, and you lose a day on either side, and jet lag, and all the rest of it. But I'm not complaining, and I wouldn't trade it. It's the best.
You can complain all you want. That's what this podcast is for.
Is it? That's what it is? It's just a complaint of bitch fest? All right.
It's a complaint podcast. Okay. Wow. So that's a lot going on. What's Oracle Year about?
Oracle Year is about... it's about the future, which you could probably guess from the title, and I think is something that hopefully people will be interested in thinking about still in January. It's not post-apocalyptic Donald Trump. It's about a guy, ordinary guy, lives in New York City, is in his 20s, and he wakes up one day from this dream. And during the dream, it's just sort of a recitation of about 100 or so, like 108 events that are due to happen over the next several years. Each one has a date and a time, and then just a sentence or two of what's going to happen. And when he wakes up, this whole list is like stuck in his mind, and he writes it down in a notebook. And then he's like, what the hell was this? And then when the first one comes true in a day or so, he's like, okay, I think maybe I know what this is. I don't understand it, but this seems to be a list of things that are actually gonna happen. It's predictions. And so he tries to figure out what he's gonna do with it, and ultimately he tries to sell them because predictions of the future are valuable, and he succeeds. And so by chapter 3, he and sort of an investment banker friend of his who helped kind of set up the whole system have made like $4.5 billion. But he still has a bunch of predictions left. He still doesn't know why he got them. And now the world is starting to react and understand that there's like this prophet out there, this person who seems to know the future. And so the story is about the two threads of the story are what's happening to the world as these predictions, as the reality of a prophet kind of changes things like, government and religion and the economy and, all kinds of stuff. Like in one prediction, he mentions chocolate milk, and so everybody starts drinking chocolate milk because they think like it's a cool thing now, chocolate milk. So Hershey's wants to sponsor him, like it's stuff like that. Like it's a very kind of beat by beat, ground level thinking about what it would be like if an oracle actually popped up in the world. And then the second sort of thread of the story is what happens to this guy, and like why did he get these predictions, and how is he changed by all of this. And so it takes place over about a year. It's the Oracle Year, and I think it's cool. I think people will be interested in reading a book about somebody who knows the future.
Yeah.
And, you know, so.
I mean, I feel like I know the future right now. It's depressing.
Yes, I know.
Right.
Yeah, and I started writing it years ago, but it, man, like if there's ever a time you'd want a crystal ball, like it is right now. Like, I mean, day by day, like I want a crystal ball for like,
year ago, maybe.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind a crystal ball to even look into next week, like just to see if we're, you know, and sure, a year from now, make sure we're all going to be okay. And crazy times, man, crazy times.
What got you into writing?
Well, so I started my creative side of things as a musician. I've been a musician for a long
Just
time.
saying a singer.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard some of your covers.
Oh yeah, cool.
On your website.
So yeah, so I was doing that since, you know, my mom had me playing violin when I was 3, like long time, and I got into guitar and stuff in high school. For, you know, the obvious reasons guys start playing guitar in high school.
Chicks.
Exactly.
Got it.
And then, you know, but then I got into law school, and I was still, and by that time I had studied composition at Penn, and I was in a ton of bands and had done a lot of different things, and I considered being a professional musician for my career. And then I got into law school. I got into Columbia, which is a fantastic school, the kind of school you sort of don't turn down if you get into it. And my mom was ill at the time. She ended up sort of passing away, like not super long, like sort of, it was right before I was going to get into law, or before I was going to go to law school. And she
passed from?
cancer. So basically, when she was in her last time of her life, I got into Columbia, and she's like, okay, and I have 3 siblings, and she's like, okay, well, I'm worried about the other ones. I don't know what's going to happen to them, but you're okay. And so I'm like,
Are you
well,
the oldest?
No, I'm the second oldest. I'm older brother, younger sister, younger brother. But so then I'm like, well, even though I wasn't totally convinced that like being a lawyer was what I wanted to do or what I should do, like at that point you're kind of like, well, I mean, I'm going to law school. So I went, and it was fantastic. It was expensive, but fantastic. And I came out of it with this very flexible, very useful credential, which is the Columbia Law degree. But I also knew, to get back to your original question about why I got into writing, I knew almost right away that I wouldn't be able to like go play shows with my band, I'd be working. Yeah, exactly. Like I'd be working till 10 or 11 at night, and it wasn't rehearsal like every day. I mean, the first 3 years of being an attorney are pretty much 80-hour weeks. You can just in Manhattan, you can pretty much just bank on it. So I needed a creative outlet, and I knew it couldn't be music to the same level I had been doing it. And so I just started writing, and I started writing short stories, and I wrote a novel, which is not The Oracle Year. It's something else that I wrote before that probably will never see the light of day. And then, that was a good outlet, and I had been reading comics for a long time, and I loved them. And sort of somewhere in that time period, in those sort of first 5 years of practicing law, I got heavy back into comics again. You know how like you sort of dip in and out of comics over your life?
Yep.
So this was one of these periods where I got back in as very much like, I'm so exhausted after working for 12 hours. I get home, I just want to read something, that isn't Albert Camus or something. Just sort of like, I want to see some superheroes doing some cool stuff. So got really back in, and then I was like, well, I could maybe do this. Like I have resources from being an attorney. I could hire cool artists, and so I started doing short stories, and then you kind of ping pong back and forth through I think you can, over the arc of learning to be a good comics writer, which is not something anybody's born with. It's a skill set you really have to practice and put together, and you have to write a lot of bad comics before you write a good one, just like anything else. Mm-hmm. But you also, the other side of it that isn't really talked about that much as far as breaking into comics and getting asked to write something like Daredevil is you have to learn the business of comics. You have to learn the entire network from top to bottom. And so you have to know who the power players are. So your editors-in-chief, your Casadas and your Axel Alonsos and all those folks. But you also have to know all of the editors and associate editors beneath them. You have to know all the different kind of creators who are at your level and then all the way up the ladder above you, because you can't really access all those top people right away. But you have to start with the network that's around you, and you have to think of the publishers that you have access to and the editors who will talk to you when they don't know who the hell you are. And so that takes a lot of time. It's a lot of going to conventions. At that time, it was a lot of networking on message boards, just to sort of see who everybody is and see how things happen and make connections and make friends. And get people who are willing to put that word in somebody else's ear when it counts. And that took years. I mean, I started thinking about doing comics, like selling comics, getting my comics into the world around 2004, 2005, and I didn't have my first thing published until 2009. So, yeah.
You've
so
gone a long way in
yeah, I know.
5-6 years. Though.
Yeah. It happened really fast, and I'm really lucky.
You were self-published initially, right? More or less.
Yeah, more or less. I had a few short stories that were self-published, and then there was there's a company called Slave Labor Graphics, SLG, that's based in San Jose, and they were one of the companies, and they still sort of are. They've stepped away from publishing a bit, but for 20 years, they were one of the companies that tended to publish people first. The guy who runs the company is named Don Votto, and he had Dan Votto, Don. Anyway, so and he has a very sharp eye for talent, and so he was the first guy to publish like tons of people. Jonan Vasquez is pretty notable, but I also think Jonathan Hickman. Me, Phil Hester, like there's a whole, if you Google it, there's a whole list. But
was that letter 44?
That was actually Strongman, which is like, we're going way back. That's a deep cut.
Okay.
It was a book about an old kind of washed up luchador wrestler who may or may not have had a lot of head injuries and sort of gone mildly insane. And he decides to put his mask on again and start just beating up criminals up in Spanish Harlem. And, it sort of goes okay for him, actually. He's fine at the end. But it was a book that I think had a print run in the hundreds, maybe 750 or some number like that. And so if that's the total print run, you think of the number of people who are actually going to find it in a store and buy it and like it, like the
very few.
Very, very few. But the fortunate thing was that one of those people was a guy named Nick Spencer, who I knew from one of those message boards, the Bendis board. Yeah, Morning Glories. Yep. And he's writing the big Marvel event this summer, too. It's funny, like, that Bendis board, to speak of another sort of talent pool, has generated so many creators that you would have heard of. Now, I mean, again, Hickman was on that board. I was on that board. Joss Fialkov.
It was a Bendis board?
Yeah, for years. Brian Michael Bendis, who was one of the big Marvel writers for a long time. And
he's the king, right?
Yeah, he's really, 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 he's something else. And
when you spoke about dipping in and out of comics, I was out of it for a while, and then
Was it Ultimate Spider-Man?
I started reading his Alias.
Oh, that's a great book. That's a great book.
Avengers Disassembled.
Yeah, perfect.
Brought me back.
Yeah,
what the hell?
He was able to do that, multiple times in his career. Like, he has so many entry books for people. He's fantastic. He also did a hell of a run on Daredevil, which, writing Daredevil is a blast, but man, you stand in the shadow of some really amazing writers.
Drew Baker.
Yeah, Mark Wade. I mean, Frank Miller. Like, it's something else. But anyway, so Nick Spencer read Strongman, and he then took my next pitch, which is for a rock and roll, sort of supernatural rock and roll book called 27, and put it in the hands of Jim Valentino, who is one of the Image founders, and was able to open another door. So I got 27 out through Image, and then my name started to be out there a little bit because 27 was like a tiny bit of a buzz book. Again, not huge, but a little bit. Enough that I got a little coverage, and then you network that forward, and then that takes us to letter 44, and another book called Strange Attractors, which I did Strange Attractors for Archaea, which is now Boom, and letter 44 with Oni Press, which is still going, and we're almost finished with now. It's been going for about 4 years, which is pretty good for a creator-owned book. And then somewhere in that span of time, around 2012, I was finally approached by DC, by an executive at DC, who has since become a very good friend named Jeff Boysen, who was like, hey man, I've read some of your stuff. I've read 27. The Strange Attractors book looks cool. Like, have you ever wanted to write for DC? And I'm like, yes, obviously, but that's not, it's not like my choice, like I don't get to just call them up and start writing for DC. Like they need to invite you.
Let me tell you, Jeff Johns.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is how it's done. So that was San Diego Comic-Con 2012. In fall of that year at New York Comic-Con in October, I met an editor named Matt Idelson who ended up asking me to pitch on Swamp Thing. So I did a pitch on Swamp Thing. I took that book over from Scott Snyder, who is, again, huge shadow casting writer, Batman writer, you name it.
Jeff Lemire, did he write that too?
Jeff Lemire was writing another book called Animal Man, and Scott's run and Jeff's run are very, very closely linked. But by the time I took over Swamp Thing, Jeff's Jeff was sort of off doing his in his
I
own
was reading
direction.
that stuff. I was reading
Yeah,
that
it
stuff.
was cool.
Yeah,
It was cool.
Your stuff and his stuff.
Ah, awesome. I'm glad. So that was my first big 2 project.
I was like, who's this guy, Charles? Soule?
Nobody's ever heard of him. He's some joker idiot who's going to ruin the book forever. But yeah, so then, the fastest way to get a job at Marvel is to take a job at DC, because then they're like,
That's funny.
who's this guy?
Right.
Who's this guy? So
Well, how does that work out? So, okay, so you're doing your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How do contracts work? Do you get to kind of freelance? I know DC and Marvel, they're more, what's the word? I don't know, but they keep you more, right? That you're not allowed.
yeah, you're like under exclusive or on contract.
thank you.
Exclusive, yeah. They do. I would say each house right now each house has a group of exclusive contract creators that they will sign up for some amount of time, and then they are generally prevented from working for the other one. So
Right.
if you work for Marvel, you can't work for DC, and vice versa.
and or any other
Or Valiant, or really, it's
anything.
generally it tends to be superhero stuff. So you can't do other superhero projects.
where you could write a book.
Yeah, you can write a novel,
or
and you can and depending on how it works, you can do creator-owned projects too. So like I have this new book that's just started called Curse Words,
Right.
and Letter 44 has been going through the time that I've been working on for Marvel as well. So
So those don't count as superhero books.
no,
Because
Letter
they're
44
not-
is kind of like a science fiction political thing, and Curse Words is this weird. I mean, it's super fun, but it's about like wizards battling in New York City, like hipster wizards in New York City. So it's
Hipster wizards.
yeah, I mean, it's silly, but it's fun.
That's funny.
So those are sort of far enough away from the core Spider-Man, Daredevil stuff that they don't see it necessarily as competitive for eyeballs. So yeah, but basically, if you sign a contract with Marvel or DC, then they're your core superhero writing job.
Okay.
But if you haven't signed that contract, you can work for whoever.
Right.
Really, you're a freelancer. And generally speaking, you don't work for both for very long before one of them makes you an offer to if you are having a number of books at both,
Right.
you do well and your name gets out there, you can expect to get that you will get an offer from them to go exclusive. And so when I started talking to Marvel about coming on board under contract, I was working on I don't know, some like 8 books a month, like some insane number that was just not healthy or good.
At DC?
It was both.
Oh,
So
both.
I had books at both companies, and they were these are things in development. These are creator-owned titles. These are
Everything.
just everything, and it was really 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 overwhelming. So a big part of my decision in signing the contract was just so that I could slow down a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Like have to.
Why don't you just do like 2 titles a month or something?
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? I could make it even better and focus.
Right. Well, I mean, do you not have choice about that? Or?
You do have choice, but like, look, I'll tell you. I mean, the books I'm doing now are Daredevil, which has been a dream project forever. I'm doing a Star Wars book, Poe Dameron, which is set. It's the only book in the Episode 7 timeline. So I'm the only comic writer who's getting, of all the Star Wars writers, who's getting to play with like all those toys, BB-8, Poe Dameron, all that stuff.
Right.
I'm working on. Well, let's just say the IVX, big X-Men, huge event X-Men, like, and then there's 2 other books for Marvel that I can't even talk about yet.
Right.
But if I told you about them, you'd be like, okay, I get it. Like, you don't say no to that.
I see.
And-
So they come to you and they're like, all right, and we know you're doing these things. How about we add this to it? And you're like, shit,
Yeah.
I can't say no to it.
Yeah, and I think saying no, like, I have said no to things, but it's if the project is something that I feel like I can hit a home run on, and like is not gonna break me. I always say that before I take it, so I don't know if it's gonna break me or not. Sometimes it feels like it does, but I'm just, I don't know. I like writing stuff that excites me. I like thinking that I have.
Maybe you just like being busy all the time.
I mean, that's it, right? I mean, that's certainly what it seems to be. Like, I don't like sitting around. I never really have. So I think that I mean, I don't know. It's weird to think of a time when like I wake up and I literally like don't have anything to do during the, like I can't even imagine. It's been so long that I don't really know what that would feel like.
Right. Do you have kids?
Yeah, I have one daughter. So I'm married. I've been married to my wife for coming up on 15 years, which is awesome.
Oh, wow.
And my daughter's 10. She's going to be 11 in May. And I think that's a reason I like being a writer, because even though I'm super busy, like last night I had to finish a script, but I could finish it kind of after I spent some time with Rosie, my daughter, in the evening. So but if I was at like a partner at a law firm or something like that, I would just have to be at the office doing whatever. So
So you're your own lawyer, right? I mean, like your own practice.
yeah, exactly.
So you're your own boss.
Yeah, I am. Again, like I had an office, I had staff and everything, and I closed all that down in like a year ago last September. So September 2015, I shut the office because I thought, I mean, writing was going so incredibly well that I thought it would be better for me and for my clients to because you can't. It's very hard to. It's very hard. I think it's stupid and unethical to like half-ass lawyering, and so it was getting to a point where like I felt like I was gonna. It hadn't happened yet. Like I feel like I was putting everything, like giving everything to both sides, and there was going to be a point where something bad was going to happen on one side or the other, and it just didn't. I didn't think I needed it anymore. Certainly I didn't need it. I was doing well enough from writing. Things looked like they were going to be doing well enough for some time to come that I could afford to set the legal income aside and just move on to writing. And honestly, writing is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And if the choice was be a lawyer for the rest of your life or be a writer for the rest of your life, it would be writing 1,000%. And so I, decided to pursue it. And that's all there is to it. I decided to just make the choice.
Do you think there'll be a time when you phase out lawyering completely?
I was fairly close until the executive order, until a couple of weeks ago. Like I didn't have very many active cases, and I can see that happening again. I mean,
now that Trump's in office, this could overshadow your writing, really.
Yeah, but again, I still have a choice. Like I don't always have to take a case, and so what I might do is try and find ways that I can help that don't require me to directly take on clients. Like I can do counseling. I can do, there's a great organization called the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and they have a lot of ways for lawyers to do outreach and help that aren't necessarily the same as I'll take your case, I'll see it through, I'll make sure if we have to go to court, we go to court, and like things like that. So it's really an evolving line of thought with me. Like I don't really know where it's all going to go, but it's kind of like, you see you're a doctor and you see a car accident at the side of the road, like you stop and try to do something. And that's kind of how I feel about it.
Or you go home and write comics.
Yeah, or you go home and write comics.
Drive right past.
Yep, and that's not me anymore. See you later, suckers. I'm going to go write, I'm going to go write Punisher. Yeah.
Have you had, what have you been enjoying most writing? This last year or two.
Yeah. That's a good question. Well, I'll tell you, Curse Words has been really fun because it's the first new creator-owned project I've done in a while. It's coming out. Issue 1 came out from Image in last month, and then issue 2 is actually out next Wednesday, on February 22nd.
Is it true to its title? Are there lots of curse words?
Some, but it's supposed to be kind of like a pun or whatever because it's about wizards, curse words. You get it. You get it. So it's a way to write a book that is at the start of its run. Like the other big creator-owned project I've been doing is this Letter 44 book, which has been, it's going to end with issue 35, which is kind of always the plan. But it's like there's a real difference in feel between writing like the last couple chapters of a book and writing the first chapter of a book, and it feels very fresh and new. And I'm working with this collaborator named Ryan Brown, who is the co-creator of the book. He's the artist, who's somebody who I've admired and really enjoyed kind of like hanging out with and making up we've done like little short stories and stuff together before, and so now to do something longer form that we're both really committed to it's just been fun. Just been like all the shackles. Not that I shouldn't call them shackles, but there are certainly things you can't do with Daredevil that you can do with your own weird wizard character. Sure. And so it's been neat just to sort of see what I'm capable of when I, for better or for worse, when I don't have to worry about rules and stuff. So that's been great, and the response has been really cool. Like it's just been really gratifying to know that people want to read my stuff, even if it doesn't have a character that they've been reading for 40 years.
Where do you find your artists? Marvel's
It depends.
their artists.
Yeah, Marvel. So Marvel has a stable, or like a Rolodex, whatever you want to call it. And so they generally are, and they have some of the best in the business. And so they are great at staffing projects for that. When it's a creator-owned project, you talk to your friends. You talk to people that you've worked with before. At the beginning of the process, you have to hire them, and they're people that you find using classified boards online or ads or Twitter, DeviantArt, things like that. And you say, I'll pay you this much per page, and they say yes, and then you start working together. As you get more established in the business, which is really, I'm very lucky to be in this place. You can talk to artists, and they'll have known your work, or they'll know your reputation, or they'll talk to each other, and hopefully the word is good. Like all the artists talk to each other about which writers are good, bad, or good people, good writers, whatever. And I've been really lucky that I can reach out to people that I admire, and they'll at least take the call. So we don't always end up doing books together, but we can talk about projects and try and put things together, and publishers like Image, who are very, very supportive of creator-owned comics and creator-owned ideas. They also will take my call too, which is just a really nice place to be. I think it's what a lot of comic writers and artists kind of really work towards, is being able to put their to have a foot in both worlds. Something in the big established universes that everybody already knows, as well as being able to tell stories kind of in your own image or vision or whatever you want to do. So unless I really tank something, that's where I am now, and it's a great place to be.
But I'm taking a comic book writing class.
Oh, is that right?
Online.
Okay.
This Andy Schmidt.
Oh, Andy Schmidt is great. Comics Experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's awesome. Yep.
Okay, I started that. So it's interesting. So are you self-taught as a comic book writer, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I am. But there are one of the resources that helped immensely was that board, though, that Bendis board. Like I say I'm self-taught, but that doesn't mean that I didn't have resources available to me. Like there were
Go up and ask questions.
Yeah, exactly. Because that board had a level that went all the way up to Bendis. Like he didn't always answer questions all that much, but he was around, and the board had like, I don't know if you remember what message boards used to be like, but there would be all these different, like rooms on the board, and there were all of his different pro friends, like David Mack had a room, I think Gail Simone had a room, maybe David Finch, and all these different people. And so you could go on their boards and ask them questions if you wanted to.
Wow.
And so everybody...
Does that exist still? Or
No, he shut it down. There used to be 3, maybe 4 that were big, and it was the Bendis board. Brian K. Vaughan had a board, and Mark Miller had a board. And Mark Miller's board might still be around, but I could be wrong. And so you could just go to they had very active communities. And again, like the people who were on those boards and then came out of them are many people you would probably know now. That's where a lot of people networked and got trained and learned the craft, particularly of writing. So people would share scripts. There were a lot of these like, let's all write a 4-page story. Let's write a 2-page story this week and send it around, and everybody can critique it and things like that. And so yeah, I mean, I was self-taught. I didn't take Andy's class or any other courses, but you read a million comics and you look at what a script looks like, and you think about the way that panels work across a page and the tricks that can be done with the page turn and the gutters and how you use captions and all the different things that I'm sure you're learning about. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of it is just responding to, it's just like novels or any other type of writing. It's you write what you respond to, and then when you start, you're copying things that you like, copying stuff and styles that you think are cool. And for me, that would be things like Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore and Brian K. Vaughan. And then as you move on, you start hopefully developing your own voice and style and writing things that reflect your worldview to a degree, while still retaining all those influences. And if all that, if you can even transcend that level, you do something that's completely unique that nobody else has done before, that nobody else could do, because it's so you and so smart and observant, and so much a distillation of your interior voice. It's hard to do that because you can see like there's all this weight pulling you towards, I know that this beat will work because it's worked so many times before in comics or novels or whatever. Like I know when I don't know, somebody turns around and is revealed as the traitor, it's going to work because it's a surprise and it's a shock, whatever. But then you think, well, okay, what if nobody ever is revealed as the traitor? There's one, but then, yeah, just whatever the thing might be. And so, like, getting to the point where you know what everybody else has already done, which means you have to read a ton of stuff, and then you internalize that, so you understand the rules and the tropes and all those things, and then you figure out just how to break them to tell something that is yours as opposed to everybody else's is hard. And even then, to make it like commercially successful and have people be into it it's tough. But it's like, I mean, what better journey to try and go on than that, right?
Yeah. So, are you involved with the Marvel retreats?
Oh yeah, yep. I just did one a couple weeks ago, actually.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. What's that like? I know you're not actually retreating anywhere, right? You're in the city.
We're in the city.
You're not like in a cabin.
No.
I always envisioned it like you guys in a cabin doing on hikes.
It is much less interesting than that. We're in a. That would be. I wish we could go out and be in cabins, but it's generally in a big, huge conference room up at the usually a Disney office or an ABC office or something like that in town, and in Manhattan, and everybody flies in. So all those contract people we're talking about before, everybody flies in, and we sit in a room for 3 days, and we're usually working.
How long are those days?
How long do they feel, or how long do they time-wise?
Are they actually? Because you get in at 9.
You get at 9, and then you're done around 5, and then you have dinner, and so it all continues, and then you do it again the next day, and then the third day is usually a little bit shorter depending on what we've gotten done. So they're and I love going to them. But they are also one of the most intense creative experiences I've ever had, because you're in a room with all these guys we're talking about. So like, at this last retreat, you had really a rogues gallery of like the heaviest hitters. I mean, Bendis was there, Mark Waid was there, Jason Aaron, who I also think is phenomenal. I have immense respect for him. Lots of people. I was there, and I was there too.
How many people in the room?
Well, they have the editors and the assistant editors and a lot of marketing PR people, and then they have people from other departments who are there to kind of, so games and things like that, who come in to see what the thread of stories are going to be over the next year or two.
20 people?
No, it's more like 40 or 50 people.
Oh, shit.
So it's a really big room, but the great thing about it is that everybody, no matter.
Where do you sit? Are there enough chairs?
Well, it's a really big table. It's a big room, huge room. Wow. And the idea is that anybody who wants to say something on any topic has a voice. And so if we're talking about some hyper detailed plot point about, some story, the person who works as a second tier games editor in an office who's never met any of us before can say, well, wouldn't it be cool if we used, I don't know, Batman there, which is probably not what we would say at a Marvel retreat, but you know what I mean? And then if it's a good idea, then it gets played. Everyone's like, oh, that's great. And then, and it's a very, very welcoming and very open creative environment. Really anything goes. And that's, it's literally one of those there are no bad ideas situations, which is very freeing and very cool.
Who's in charge with all those people? There's got to be one person that's kind of...
Well, it's mostly the editor-in-chief, Axel Alonso.
Okay.
He kind of runs the show and makes sure everything's kind of moving forward and we're getting through the agenda.
And do you know the agenda before you get there?
Yeah.
So, and then are you expected to bring like ideas?
Well, ideally, we all are like so full of ideas that it's easy.
Or are you just making up ideas on the spot?
Sometimes it's both. Like like for example, I write Daredevil, as we've talked about many times, and so I'm expected to give almost a report on the status of Daredevil, kind of catch everybody in the room up on this is what's been happening in case you haven't read it, or in case you are that games person who might be interested in some of these plot points, and here's where I think it's going to go for maybe the next year or so, and here's how I think it might connect to some of the bigger company-wide stories we're doing. And so on and so forth. And so I have a number of those areas that I talk about, as does everybody else in the room. And so at that point, you come in with ideas, but you also, if one of the other writers or an artist or whoever it might be is like, well, wouldn't it be cool if we use Batman? then and it sparks. Like if the room likes it or you like it, then you talk about it and you hash it out. And well, what would it be like if we use Batman? And it's really, it can get very, very, very like you can't believe kind of the way the leaps work in the room, because these, again, when things really get going, you have people who are like, it's this you can almost see this cloud forming above the table of all the ideas sort of zipping back and forth, the electrons moving all over the place. And it's great, but it's also like you're using your brain at, so this conversation we're having right now, right? So I'm trying to be clever, I'm trying to be interesting, you're trying to ask me questions that, whatever. So I'd say we're at like a solid 8,
Okay, yeah.
So these retreats are like
100.
Yeah, like you're burning through so much energy just to make sure that you are up to speed and following everything and are contributing ideas that are going to be helpful to other people's ideas and being open to their ideas. And it's really a workout. It's an Olympic level creative workout, but it's the best.
Have you done one before?
I've been doing it. As part of the contract thing, you generally start being in the room for the retreats. So I've been going for years now, and we do them several times a year.
What did you think that first time you went? Were you oh shit.
Yeah, I was exactly like that. I was terrified. And it was it was great. I mean, I had to present about a big book called Death of Wolverine. I did, which is the first really big project I did for Marvel. And
that's you pitching. That's your idea. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it had been fairly, like I knew what I was going to do. It wasn't like I was presenting how I was going to kill Wolverine to the room for the first time. Like the story had been somewhat vetted by the editors already that I was working with. But when you go in the room, it's like, hypothetically, if the people in the room are like, well, that sounds like the dumbest goddamn thing I've ever heard in my life, then that's not a good sign. It's not a good sign.
Has that happened?
No one would be that like
blunt.
Yeah, but when the looks, people start kind of like looking at each other like, what the hell is he talking about? And like, you can feel it. Yeah, you can feel when the room is not into it. And so at that first summit, I'm presenting and I hadn't met a lot of these guys before. Everybody was super nice. Everybody's always super nice, but these were literally some of my heroes, like writing heroes. And here I am telling them my idea about how I'm gonna kill Wolverine. So it was very intimidating. And you also want to have that. You don't have to come up with home runs every time when you're presenting ideas or saying things. But if you're going to speak up in that room, you want to make sure that you have at least one really like, oh man, remember when Charles said that? And that's what I was very focused on for the first several summits, is making sure I had those. And now I'm kind of like, well, you know what? It happens if it happens. I'm going to make sure that the ideas are good, and I kind of have a more organic approach to it than I did. I'm not, the room is, it's just like anything else. You do it more times and you get better at it. You understand it more, and it's less terrifying. But the first couple times, it was intense.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I would love to just be a fly on the wall or something. Even if you guys put a camera and streamed.
Yeah, the problem is
without sound, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that we're talking about like this hyper top secret stuff. Like a little bit of we talk about
the arcs, right?
We do the arcs. We talk about we talk almost no less than 18 months out, and usually it's more like 2 years out. Sort of some of the far stuff. We're focused on, by the time you have a retreat, like so this last one we had a couple weeks ago, we already knew all the stuff that was happening this summer. So we refreshed that, but the focus of the conversation is more like the middle ground. It's what's happening in like 2017. And then...
I'm sorry.
Or 2018. Sorry, 2018. God, I can't remember what year it is. Yeah.
And in these meetings, is like the movie stuff brought up too? Because you had like a Civil War too.
Yeah. To a degree. Movies. Those zones are a little bit separate. But we talked about Defenders. We talked about some of the slate coming up. But it's usually fairly broad. This is an area that we suspect will be touched. Like it's, the movie people will kind of gives some very, very rough directions, but it's never, we're always on our own track. The comics are making their own stories. So it's never like you have to do this because this is what's going to happen in Civil War.
Sure.
You know, Captain America,
but
whatever.
It makes sense marketing wise. Civil War's coming out. You want to have like some sort of something that says Civil War on the stands, right?
Yeah.
More or
But
less?
yes, but I think it's more like, here's some, I mean, it's very, like, it's pretty rare. We really don't talk about movie stuff that much. But every once in a while, someone will be like, well, you know what? This is something that you might want to consider. And it's usually not given much context. It's not like this is the breakdown of what happens in this movie.
Gotcha.
But, you know, so I know more than you do probably about, well, you probably know a fair number of things about a fair number of things, considering. But
Not as much as you might think.
yeah, all right. But like, so I know more than the average, you know, person on the street might know about what's going to happen in some of the movies and stuff like that. But really, it's not a lot, not a ton. Like I know a lot about
the scripts or anything. You
No,
privy to that?
we don't get the scripts. You know, but it's the same with like the Star Wars stuff that I work on. Like there, you know, you get occasional shadows of a glimpse of something that might be coming down the road.
'Cause you have to, in that sense, you need some sort of consistency, right?
Yeah. They want to make sure that every project that comes out, whether it's a comic, so this is Lucasfilm we're talking about now.
Right.
Every comic, every video game, every novel, every film, every TV show, they're all part of the same big story that's being told. So if I'm going to do something in Poe Dameron, the Poe Dameron comic, I can't, it can't contradict something that's going to happen in, say, Episode 8,
Right.
The Last Jedi, or even something that happened in a Star Wars novel that was set back in like prequel time. So like you, and the Lucasfilm Story Group, it's I think I forget. I'm not really sure how many people are on the Lucasfilm Story Group because it seems like the membership is kind of evolving all the time. But I think it's like 8 people. And they all have slightly different responsibilities, but generally speaking, they're all incredible Star Wars experts. And so they know just off the bat, oh, well, you know, don't do that in this comic because Charles did it in Poe Dameron 8. Or don't do that in this video game because in the movie this might happen. You know, stuff like that. So they have eyes on everything, and it's really an interesting experience to be part of. And carving out your story and making it its own thing and making it good within the shared universe and making it feel like it matters to the shared universe is interesting and different between Marvel and Star Wars, but both really fun writing challenges for sure.
What came first, the chicken or the egg when it came to Daredevil and you? Did you go to them and say, I'd like to write Daredevil? Did they go to you? Because it makes sense. You're an
attorney.
lawyer.
Yeah, sure. Well, one of the early projects I did for Marvel, the second project I took on with them was a book called She-Hulk. And She-Hulk,
She's a lawyer as well.
She is a lawyer. And so She-Hulk, you know, the fact that I had a legal background, I think, was one of the reasons I was considered for that job. And it was a book that a lot of people really responded to. It ran for 12 issues, well, 13 really. We did one more sort of tag up issue at the end, but it was the first project for me that I think, other than Death of Wolverine and She-Hulk they're very different. Like Death of Wolverine is a blockbuster summer movie, and She-Hulk is more like an indie quirky movie that really represented my own voice as a writer in a way. And you know, I had done other stuff I was really proud of, but I think that She-Hulk and Death of Wolverine were the two projects that gave Marvel confidence that I could do a number of different, you know, I could be trusted with kind of bigger, more complex things. And at that time, Mark Waid and you know, Paulo Rivera and Chris Samnee were working on their incredible run of Daredevil that preceded mine. It was winning every Eisner in the world and like all these awards and, you know, just lots of press. It was great. So the Daredevil gig was not available, and I sort of didn't want it. Like I loved that book, and so there was really, I didn't have any interest in.
Did you have ideas for him or anything like that?
Yeah, you always, you know, think about it. You're you know, sitting in the bar having a drink or something. You're like, what would I do with this character? But the gig wasn't available, and so it wasn't until it would have been spring of 2015. It looked like when Mark was like, I think I'm done. I think I'm going to move on. after, so there was this big summer event that kind of had all the books pause, and then after that, the idea was that a new writer would come onto Daredevil, and I had enough of a pedigree at that point in Marvel that they said, Charles, would you like to take a hack at it? And so I've been hacking away ever since, trying to write good stories.
You started at the, I don't know, reboot or whatever. It's at number. It was at
right
number
after,
one.
yeah.
Right?
When I started with a new Daredevil #1, which is a real privilege. There's only been 5, I think. So getting a Daredevil #1 is awesome, and it's working with Ron Garney on the art and Goran Sudzuka and some of the other folks. Ron Garney has drawn you, which is pretty neat.
Yep. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. And then, just finding a way to tell a Daredevil story that's mine as opposed to anybody else's has been hard, but also just a blast, and especially at a time when the show is out and people are aware of Daredevil in a way that they really weren't before. He always had a very, very healthy comic book fan base, but this is as prominent as he's been in pop culture since 2004 when the Ben Affleck Jennifer Garner movie was out, and that movie didn't have the kind of response that the TV show is having. So it's a pretty cool time to be writing Daredevil for sure. It's nerve-wracking, just like any of these gigs. You don't want to screw it up, and so I'm on it for a while. At the retreat we talked about the plans out for a good while to come. So unless something drastic happens, I'm going to be writing it for a while yet, which is cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you already know that. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So when you sign on with a contract, it doesn't say which titles you're.
Oh no.
It's just kind of
you bounce around. It's like they consider you one of part of the team, and so they need a.
You're just an employee, and whatever's needed, you do it.
Well, yes and no. You can say no to anything,
right?
And they're very good at matching creators to projects, both artists and writers. And so, the goal is not to put a writer on something they're not going to have a story for, or something they're not going to be able to do. It's just stupid. So, it doesn't help anyone. So they tend to the extent they can, they're trying to match project with creator. And I think that the books I'm on are all a good fit for me, especially because they scratch different itches. Like Poe Dameron is not the same. I don't use anything like the same voice that I use for Daredevil. So I'm using different muscles. And same thing with a big book like IVX. It's just a different, writing a huge book with 30 main characters is a totally different exercise. And being able to do it well, I think helps. It's a really rare skill set to have a chance to develop. So I'm lucky to have them all. And the other stuff that we haven't even talked about yet is also, they're all different, which is very, I like to have a varied slate. I don't want to be Charles can only write, brooding vigilantes and that's it, and there's typecasting in writing just like there is anything else. And I prefer to think that I will have a career that will let me do all kinds of different stuff. We'll see.
Well, it's funny. For my 40th birthday, which was now a year and a half ago,
okay.
Joe Quesada was kind enough to say to me that for my 40th birthday, I will be my likeness and name will be written into a Daredevil comic.
Yep.
He did not say who or when or anything like that. It was very vague.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, that sounds awesome. So cut to slightly more than a year later.
Yep.
I am roaming around New York Comic Con in the Artist Alley, and I knew I wanted to meet you.
Sure.
Because did I know you were writing me? I don't remember if I knew you were writing. I don't think so. I think I just wanted to meet you. I don't even think I knew you were writing it.
Okay.
And then I said, "Hi, Charles." And you already knew who I was.
Well, you look just. The thing is the drawing. So the other side of that story is that I was approached by the Daredevil letter at the time. It was Sana Amanat, who is awesome. And she was like, so this is weird, and I don't want it to get in the way of your story, and so technically you can probably say no to this,
right.
But here's the deal. And I'm like, that's pretty weird. This has never happened before.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it doesn't happen.
What that you get
asked
here's a guy.
Here's this random dude I never here's what want to happen. I'm like, well, so why? And he kind of explained sorry, Sana explained, she explained, and then I'm like, okay, so I looked you up, and I looked I looked up the stuff you do, and the cause and all the rest of it, and I was like, well, he seems like a good dude, and
Thank you.
so I'm happy to do it, and there's always spots for random extras and things like that.
That's what I thought it would be. I'd just be like in the background or something.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And so I started. I didn't do it right away. I was in the middle of another arc, and there wasn't a place for it. But then I had this story about, basically it was about a serial killer, like this artist serial killer named Muse. Yeah, who's a new bad guy that we made up, who's creepy, super creepy. My daughter, again, who's 10, she's gonna be 11, has decided she loves Daredevil and has been reading my comics, and she just now is at this dark art arc, and I'm a little like, I don't know, it's creepy. But anyway, so it's a serial killer story like Hannibal or something like that, and so there's a lot of space in it for background characters, extras, and there's a couple of policemen in it, and one of them is Officer Scott.
Yeah.
And he looks exactly like you. I pulled off, online somewhere, I got photo reference, and I sent it to Ron Garney, and I'm like, this guy needs to look like this guy. He's like, whatever, man, fine. and so he drew it, and you're like, so I knew what you looked like from that experience, but then I think because Ron had drawn you kind of pretty perfectly, like you look, like I'm looking at it right now, you look like you look in the comic.
Yeah.
So,
good job, Ron.
yes, exactly. And so then when you showed up at New York Comic Con, I don't think you'd seen it yet, right?
Nope. You told me about it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was out.
Yep.
You're the one that said, "Hey, did you see your comic?" I was like, "No. What are you talking about?" He's like,
Yeah.
Like, it's out right now. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh shit."
And so I don't think I had any at the table, right?
No,
And so you
I
had to go find
one.
it.
I had to
Yeah.
go find one.
And so you did. You brought it back, and I signed it for you, and then it was just fun. And I think the thing you also told me was cool was that your dad is or was a cop.
My dad's a cop. And
Yeah.
it's funny. I took like a picture of it and I sent it to him. He was a lieutenant.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, you're a lieutenant."
Ah,
I could
perfect.
tell because of the stripes, and he knew
that's
exactly
cool.
what it was. I was like, "Yeah, that's funny."
Yeah.
So he was excited about that.
Yeah, it was good. And now that you've seen, like, he shows up in Daredevil 11, and then he shows up again in 2 issues later in Daredevil 13.
And in 12.
He's in 12.
Yep. I just read it today.
I believe you. I have to remember my own story, but yeah, I guess that's right
He's in
because there's a whole
three
three
issues.
issues. Yep. And he's got a nice little arc. Like he's got a hero moment in
Yep.
13. He's like,
Yep.
here, I'll help you out, kid. And he survives, which is not always the case.
I was so scared. I read one of the panels where Muse like throws a knife at him, makes him bleed or something.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
he's dead.
Yeah.
He's dead. But nope, he's still alive.
No, he's still alive. He made it through somehow. Many people were killed in that arc, but
Yeah.
Officer Scott survives to uphold the law and fight another day.
I have an idea.
Okay, yeah.
I know it's too late for the the retreat. Mm-hmm. So maybe this could be pitched next year.
Okay, all right. You let me know.
So with all this new bringing the universes together in Marvel, they were able to change things and bring some people back, like Gwen Stacy came
Sure.
back,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But Karen Page is still gone.
Karen Page is still gone. Yes.
So I thought Officer Scott could somehow bring her back
And start dating her?
and date her, and,
Yeah.
and like through maybe cloning or something
Sure.
along those lines.
Clone Karen Page. That is a great idea. I will absolutely bring it up at the retreat, and it'll be done. Yeah, honestly, we actually talked about bringing back Karen Page out of Secret Wars, and it was something that was talked about because she's such a big part of the show, and there's a draft of a Daredevil #1 script that has Karen Page in it. Like I even wrote the scenes with her, but then I decided that relationship and the end of it, I don't know how I'm guessing you're pretty conversant with Daredevil lore, but like the way she died, Bullseye,
Kevin Smith.
yeah, Kevin Smith took her out.
Bitch.
But that death was really important to Daredevil's mythology. Like that's when he loses his faith and he steps away from the Catholic Church, which was always such a big part of his story. And it was very momentous for him. Like a lot of stories came out of it and a lot of things that really made him evolve as a character in ways that seemed important. And so Karen Page was briefly resurrected in script form, and then she vanished again. So
You killed her again.
I didn't kill her again. I just didn't bring her back. I didn't fully resurrect her. She was like sort of grasping towards the light, and then and then I shut the
I was
door on her
praying
again.
so hard that Karen Page would come back.
Yeah,
Praying so
yeah,
hard.
yeah. I'm sure.
Dang it.
But for the moment, no. There's other stuff. I mean, it's funny too. Like Daredevil's history with love interest is shitty, to put it mildly. Like they all die, or they go insane, or they commit suicide, or whatever. They like it's bad.
Typical chicks.
Fine.
Just joking.
But so it's a big thing the minute you start putting Daredevil in a relationship, you're like, man, what's going to happen to this person? And and I even at the end of the relationship that I've been writing for Daredevil, the main second person has been Blindspot, who is his sort of protege.
Yes.
In the book, and
is he your creation?
Yeah, he's mine. I made him up, and so at the end of the Muse arc, he loses his eyes, so he is blinded. It's
that was shocking to me. I was like, oh snap! So now he's blind. I haven't read past that issue.
Yeah, there's only been 15, 16. So that was 14, and then 15 through 17 just came out today, actually.
Okay, so there's a few issues. So he must be freaking out trying to deal with that. Going blind suddenly and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, you should read it. It's cool, but the idea is to make it not cheap, not something that's just, oh, here's this bad thing that happened, so now Daredevil's going to feel bad for a while and then be re-energized. I mean, that happens to an extent, but I want it to feel very earned. And Blindspot goes on his own journey now that his eyes are gone, and a lot of things happen to him, and he has to decide. Like he had just started being a hero and just started down this vigilante gig when this awful thing happened to him, and even like. Remember, like in issue 13 is his big moment of, I signed up for this job back in the first Daredevil arc I wrote because I wanted to help my particular community, which was Chinatown. He's an undocumented immigrant himself.
Which is interesting that you
write
that.
So funny, yeah. So he was really trying to be somebody who could help his community, where there are a lot of undocumented immigrants who couldn't really feel like they could go to the law safely, the police or whatever. So that was the job he assigned himself, and then he sort of did that, and by the end of the first arc, like the big menace to his neighborhood was gone. Daredevil helped him beat him, this guy Ten Fingers, and Blindspot keeps having adventures, like keeps running around with Daredevil and stuff, but then he's like, why do I, like, especially in the Muse arc, he's like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I putting myself in this terrible danger when I don't have to? And the guy who's kind of mentoring me through it seems to be like a train wreck, like he's this grim, like his life is awful, so why do I want that for myself? And then by the end of issue 13, which is when he's questioning all this, he's like, okay, now I know why I do it, because if I don't, then like bad things will happen and terrible, like this is a choice. I'm making it, so whatever happens to me is going to be worth it, because if I don't do it, who will? That kind of stuff, hero stuff.
Sure.
He understands in his own head who he is as a hero. And then very next issue, he faces really significant consequences for that decision. He could have walked away, he doesn't, and he's hurt. He loses his eyes. And so, what does that mean to a young man? He's 19 years old. Like, his life is going to be very different moving forward. So, I don't know.
Well, what you did with that now is make another handicapped superhero.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. That's a pretty big deal. Do you maybe Blindspot? I mean, it's probably too soon to know now, but go off in his own title eventually or something.
I mean, I have very big plans for Blindspot in the Daredevil book. So I know what's going to happen with him. I know where his story goes, and then it's really about what happens next. I mean, I think I'd love to see him in his own book. That's kind of a really cool thing when you make up somebody who could be in other books or team books or anything like that. He's got a cool look. He's got a cool power. He's interesting in many ways. So, I've seen people come up to me cosplaying as him, which is always really cool and gratifying. Especially in China. I did a convention in Shanghai last fall, and some kids came. They're kids, whatever. They were teenagers. They were dressed as Blindspot in China, and you're like, how the hell did these guys even know?
He's Chinese, right?
Yeah, he's Chinese.
Sam Chung.
Yeah, exactly.
Sam Chung, right?
Yep.
And you have a background in Asian studies.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you're kind of bringing all the things that you know.
Yeah. Well, that's what you do.
It,
That's writing, as I'm sure Andy Schmidt has told you. Like, that is really important, is to write the things that are personal to you. And even so, I do a lot of writing panels at conventions and stuff like that, kind of talking to people about how to do it. And one of the things I say is if you're going to write,
Keep going. I'm just going to check the time.
yeah,
Go ahead.
if you're going to write a big intergalactic space battle story, try and write it from a perspective that you understand. So, you might, we've all seen Star Wars. Like, we know what the big version of that is.
I never saw it.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Well, it sure is good.
Go ahead,
You might like it. But we've seen those stories told on the biggest level, right? But so you need to find a way to tell it that's interesting or personal to you. So maybe your version of it is, maybe your job is literally you're just like washing dishes at the diner or something like that. So your story is this is what it's like for a guy who is like washing dishes on the spaceship, and then it gets involved in a war. This big space war. So like what it's like to feel like exhausted after a day and all you want to do is go to bed and then something happens or whatever it is, but it's your story told through whatever lens you want to do. And the mistake I think people make is telling stories that go to the big stuff first and don't approach it from a personal perspective. So with Daredevil and all my stuff, there's a reason all these things keep popping up again and again in my stories, because I know these things, and hopefully I won't exhaust my resources and like burn through everything I know or have learned or have experienced. I still have a few things I haven't hit yet in my stories. But then that's when you go have new experiences and you just research and you learn about other people's experiences. I mean, you can have the experience yourself, or you can learn about it and then write about it. So,
how long you been running?
Well, that's another story. So, I started running regularly in probably right around 2009, and I had been running.
It's pretty recent. I started in about the same, maybe 10.
I wonder.
2010 I started.
I wonder if it's the same reason. It'd be crazy if it was.
Right.
So the reason I started running, I mean, I was running before that, kind of intermittently, like go to the gym every once in a while kind of thing when I was stressed out. But I really started running heavy duty because I applied for and was picked to be a contestant on Jeopardy.
That is not the reason I started running.
No, okay, all right. So I was like,
That's cool.
Man, like 7 million people watch that show when it's on. And I'm going to be on in front of all those people, and I want to look good. I want to look skinny, whatever.
Sure.
So,
Vanity.
yeah, that was it. That was all it was. And so I just started running regularly. And then when the stresses of life and existence kind of started to mount with all these other millions of jobs and all that stuff, which all kind of came around the same time, I got very into it as this sort of stress relief mental health thing. And it doesn't hurt that it is healthy and good for you. So... and I also think it's a really great way, and I saw that you're doing the, I don't know if you already did it, right? The country run on every continent?
Yeah.
Okay, which sounds awesome.
Last year.
But it's when you're in a new place, like being able to run and like sort of experience a new place through the run is a really cool, like whenever I travel, I always run outside somewhere. I've run in Buenos Aires, I've run in, well, all over the world, really, all over the place. And I love it. It's a way to travel that's like it's almost like you're taking another trip on every little run you take. You run through the neighborhoods,
Right.
you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see, smell things and hear things. Just it's a very visceral way to experience a place. So I love it. Again, like I've never done a half, I've never done a full. I think the longest run I've ever taken is like 7. And people who do longer runs, like you or whatever, they tell me that like it's really easy to scale up from that to do,
Yeah.
Say
a half.
Yeah.
Half is very. It's not easy, but
you just don't stop. You just keep going, right?
Well, you can take walking breaks.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I take walking breaks every mile. But when I run though outside, I run blindfolded.
How do you do that?
I run with a guide.
Okay.
And the sunlight's bad for my eyes.
Okay.
So I protect them
As much as you can? Sure.
There were a couple of instances where I ran without a blindfold because it was very overcast, or it was at night. I ran Las Vegas at night.
I bet that was cool.
That was cool. Well, running without anything on is because running with blindfold on is not enjoyable.
How do you do it? Like, I mean, so, I've taken falls. I mean, every runner falls every once in a while. You just misstep or you trip on something and you go over. And that's with, my eyes in the mix. So how do you like know curve? Do they like announce a curve or like how do they, is that how it works?
Yep. They're my eyes. So if there's Most of my runs are on streets during marathons. I don't practice runs. I do on treadmills. So we're basically just running straight or turning a curve or whatever. But if there are like curbs and things like that, then they'll say, all right, there's a curb coming up, or we'll slow down, we'll walk, and we'll step over it, or
or pothole or whatever it might be.
Yep, there's all sorts of stuff like that to worry about. All sorts.
Man, and you just go do it, right? Like if you trip, you trip. Like that's
you trip. And I've never fallen.
Yeah.
But I've tripped a bunch, and a lot of times, half the time, it's over other people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They run in front of me.
Yeah.
And they don't know what's going on. They're in their own world, and I can't see anything.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, well, I've done that too. Like you get, when you're in that zone, you're just like you're on autopilot to such a degree. You're just one foot in front of the other.
Have you ever done like even a 5K race or anything like those?
I
never did
never raced.
Organized thing.
Never raced. Never did any organized running. I just don't. It's not why I do it. Like I don't. Which is not to say that I mean, maybe someday. I'm doing it so that I can have my headphones on and I can be thinking about whatever story I need to write, or just thinking about nothing, which is really rare. To think about nothing is not very common for me.
Right.
So,
I bet.
And I remember there's this radio station I really like out of Seattle called KEXP, and they're like the indie station there, the college station there, and one of their big DJs there is a guy named John Richards. He's their morning DJ, and he is a huge runner too, and so he puts out these running podcasts, and so they're like usually 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes an hour and a half if it's a long one. And they're just a mix of stuff. And he's a great DJ, so the songs are all great, mix of old and new. But he also mixes them in with inspirational running quotes from, big runners and things like that. And so, or people who've written about running and they're awesome. But he'll one of the things there was one that was all about creative people who run and why they do it. And it very consistently throughout it was, our minds are always working, and so giving them a chance to just sort of be away a little bit, like be away from the problems of whatever creative thing you're working on is very useful. So, that's why I do it. And so, should I go? Is racing fun? Like, is it like?
Yeah. Especially when I'm not blindfolded.
Yeah.
It's like, I see why people like doing it.
Yeah.
It's an accomplishment. You get to cross the finish line. You get a medal. You're with all these other people that are super excited to be there.
Right.
The worst thing are the porta potties. That's the definite worst part about it.
Yeah, I can imagine. God.
But yeah, I'd say it's worth doing even just a 5K or something. They do one over at Prospect Park and stuff like that.
And 5K, that's snap.
Enough.
It's 20 minutes
or
whatever.
10K or whatever.
Yeah.
Take your daughter.
Yeah,
Does she run at all?
We've been running, but I'm bad at slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do it on purpose. But like we went for a run this summer, and she was good. She like kept up, but then at the end she's like, this is this is rough. Like her face was totally red, and she's like, man, I don't know. And so we haven't done it again. But I'm gonna.
How long did you go?
We didn't go super long. We drove down to the river, and then we kind of ran along the river path. But it was probably still a couple miles, which for
11-year-old.
Yeah, it's long. It's really long, and I try to walk, and like I'd be like, I don't know. It was not a successful experiment, but I think I learned from it. And when we go again this summer, it was also like July. It's hot, so. God. I'm gonna try and go in May, maybe when it's not quite as bad, or April.
That'd be good.
And take her out and see if she likes it. But
get some energy goos.
Yeah, exactly. You know it. My dad ran, and so I think I got a lot of my I remember going for runs with him, and it was something I really liked. So she might I feel like it's maybe a little tiny bit young, like 11, to really enjoy running.
Yeah.
Because
I didn't start though. I mean, even short runs. It's
I think so.
Used to exercising and
right,
stuff like that.
Right.
In this world.
Yeah, God. No, absolutely.
Let me ask you. So are you from Milwaukee originally?
Well, I was born in Milwaukee, but I only lived there for a little while. I spent most of my growing up time in Michigan. We lived in Grand Rapids and Detroit, and then in high school we moved to Hong Kong. So
Yeah, your Facebook page is from Hong Kong.
yeah, I
And I'm
mean,
like, what?
yeah, I wasn't born in Hong Kong. I lived there during high school, but we lived in Hong Kong and then Manila and then Singapore. And some of that time I was in college.
What happened? Why all the travel?
Why? My dad worked for a big furniture company. I wasn't military, but he worked for a big furniture company called Steelcase, and they basically posted us there, which was awesome, and I loved it. And I think it's something that has really informed the way I think about the world and the way I look at the world. And I think travel is just the best.
In what way did that inform how you look?
Well, you grow up in a suburban Michigan environment where most people look like you, think like you, talk like you, eat the same food you eat, all that stuff. And then you're dropped into a situation where none of those things are true. And this was in...
You're the minority.
Yeah, you're the minority, and it's the 90s, the early 90s. So the handover hadn't happened yet. Like, Hong Kong was still British. And so there was all this weird, it was just a very exciting place to be at that time, because it was right at the end of the UK's lease on Hong Kong, and it was all going to go back to China. Nobody knew what was going to happen, so it was very exciting. Kind of, there's a lot of energy in the air, but you go to it was a luxury to find a place that you could get, say, a bag of Doritos. Like, there were like 2 shops in all of Hong Kong that would sell you that stuff, which, again, I know, spoiled American, but it's what you grew up with. It's what you're used to.
Yeah, you take it for granted.
Yeah. And so you're being in a place where that isn't going to adapt to you, that you have to adapt to, is a very good thing. I think everybody should do it in their lives. And so I had to find a way and figure out who I was in a place that wasn't designed for, to accommodate most of the stuff that I was used to and familiar with.
And you're a teenager.
Yeah, a teenager, right? And I had left all my friends, not just sort of like the next state over, but across the ocean.
Yeah. You learn a new language?
Yeah, I didn't pick up a ton of Cantonese in Hong Kong because it was still British, so everybody spoke, and still it's still very English speaking city.
Okay.
But I started taking Mandarin, so I kept studying French while I was there, and then started taking Mandarin, and I kept studying both through college. So, but even just sort of understanding how to tell a taxi driver where you needed to go, or how to read the bus signs, or whatever it was, or like how to order food, or what the food was, or any of, top to bottom, it was just a completely different experience than anything I was ever used to. And so, and at first you're terrified, and you don't know what to do, and you kind of turn to your family, because that I got closer with my siblings than I'd ever been because of that experience. Because they're all you have, really. And then over time you start meeting people, and I went to the international school there, Hong Kong International School, and it's people move around all the time in that part of the world. There's a lot of expats who kind of bounce from Asian city to Asian city, so they're very used to people being there for a year and moving on, and new kids coming in every year. So it's almost like there were just social systems in place to introduce you to people, and not like mixers, but it's more like just the kids were more like, hey man, whatever, what's your story? And then once you tell them your story, they're like, okay, now we know it, let's go hang out. Right. So it was great. And again, I'm very formative, and I wouldn't trade it. It was really good.
Well, your parents, are they still, your mom?
My mom, both are gone, which is sad.
Oh, they're both gone. Well,
yeah,
how's your dad?
same cancer.
What kind of cancer did they?
They both had like GI tract cancer. So, my mom had colon cancer, and my dad basically had esophageal cancer. So, my doctor is very much like, all right, we're gonna pay close attention to you because they're hereditary. So,
how old were you when?
Well, let's see. I was 24 when my mom died, and dad died probably 11 years. So I was in my early 30s, I guess, maybe mid 30s, mid 30s, 34, something like that.
Are we about the same age?
I'm 42.
41. Okay.
Yeah, close enough.
Wow, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was.
Did they stay together? Were they married that whole time?
Yeah, they were married the whole time. My dad remarried after my mom passed away. So it was. Yeah, I think that was very formative. Like, to lose your mom, 24 is not super old.
Yeah.
She was only, like I said, only 54. So it was a huge hit to the family. I think I was a little more stable than my siblings were, maybe, and but everybody's pretty much good now. But it took a long time to get there, and
yeah, I bet.
losing the parents, and then and I don't know, and then when my dad remarried, like sort of he was very focused on that for a while, and so we kind of were all on our own, left our own devices for a bit. But I mean, it's not I mean, a lot of people have that story. It's not that's not uncommon. So
your mom was worried about your siblings.
yeah.
Did they turn out okay?
Yeah. I mean, my littlest brother went into the Navy, and I think that was exactly what he needed, because he didn't really know what to do with himself and didn't know what he was capable of, and so I really credit the service with giving him a sense of his own potential and capabilities, and I think it was hard, and there were some points that were very dark and tough for him, I think. Things that he still won't really discuss with me in much detail, but I do think that it gave him a way to, like, you wake up in the morning and you do these things during the day, and then your day you've accomplished something that day, as opposed to the opposite.
Do you think he was like struggling with depression or something like that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think it was also like a sense of you don't. And until you're put into a situation where you have to challenge yourself and you have to make a decision that I'm going to accomplish this thing no matter what happens, and then you don't know you can. Right. And I think that for some people, they're just not ever put in that situation, and so they're kind of they don't know how to go from A to Z on something.
No confidence.
Yeah, there's no understanding of what it feels like to be. Used to sort of talk it through with running, like, when you're running, say, like a 10K, like, to know what it feels like to be at the 4 mile mark and know you've got 2 more miles to go. Like, it's something that I think people need to almost experience and learn and repeat. It's like playing an instrument, and you're the instrument, and learning how to finish something and feel good about the way you finished it and refine it so that it gets better the next time is part of life that younger people don't always know, especially on big projects. And I think that the service for Sam, the Navy, gave him that understanding of how to start and to finish and to move on to the next thing.
His name's Sam?
Sam, yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Did you know that were you purposely naming the Blindspot after him?
Yep. And his Sam has a sister in the book named Hannah, which is my sister's name. But the funny thing was, this is going to sound ludicrous, but I knew that I was naming Sam after Sam, but it didn't occur to me until, like, literally, I saw the issue in print where we see his sister's name, and I was like, holy shit, that's my sister's name.
How'd that happen?
I don't know. It was the weirdest thing to make the connection, but your mind works in, subconscious, mysterious ways, for sure.
That's funny.
So, yeah.
That is funny. So how come... so how do you like doing music? You play guitar?
Guitar, yeah.
What else do you play?
Guitar and violin are the main instruments. I sing. I'm a pretty good singer, and I love it. I just wish I had more time for it. Like, I have this great band. We play when we can.
What's it called? What's the band called?
We kind of change our name depending on what the gig is. Like, we really don't gig out that much now. Because I just don't have time, and I'm like playing bars and stuff like that. It's kind of not where I feel like I should be putting my energy, because I'm never gonna be,
right.
I don't know.
Justin Bieber.
I'm not those. My Justin Bieber days are over. But it's all, I love it, and I play a lot at home still. And so if there's a reason, for this curse words book I mentioned before, we did a party at New York Comic Con last fall, just to kind of get the word out about it and get people going. And so the Image Comics rents out this big bowling alley in Times Square. And so there are all these rooms and kind of like side clubs in the bowling alley. And so we took one of those over, and we had our band there, and we all dressed as wizards. And so we played a set of like Sabbath and some of my stuff, and had...
Awesome. I think I saw a picture of it on your Facebook.
Yeah. And so we had wizard trivia and giveaways and all this goofy stuff, but it was fun. So that night we were just the wizard band, but I guess technically we're the Charles Soule band when we're billed that way. But usually we're just whatever we decide to call ourselves on the night of.
How's your last name pronounced?
Soule.
Soule. Okay.
Yeah.
I know a guy. It's the same spelling. He pronounces it Soule.
Yeah, it's funny. I hear a lot of Soule, all kinds of stuff, but it's just the E is silent, and that's...
Soule. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Thanks for correcting me.
Sure.
How'd you meet your wife? You were young.
Yeah, I was. I didn't even kind of realize it, but yeah, I was young. We met at a wedding of a. This is gonna sound bad, but like kind of a mutual cousin, and she would be. She would not be.
Wait,
she
no?
hates when I tell the story. She hates it, but it's not.
It's not that bad.
It's not that bad. It's not
Go
that bad.
ahead.
It's a mutual cousin by marriage. So there's no shared.
Bloodline.
No bloodlines, and even if it were, it'd still be like 6 cousins or something. So it's fine. It's totally fine.
It's
but,
legal.
Yeah. So
The daughter has no
she
second
doesn't have
heads.
exactly. Yeah, it's all good. But we met at this wedding, and I mean, it's not anything too spectacular. Her sister and this cousin were both like, man, we should really get them together. So the cousin told me, oh, Amy thinks you're really hot. And Amy's sister said, oh, Charles thinks you're really, something else. And so we're like, well, this is a home run. Let's talk to each other. And so we hit it off. And then, she was still living in Michigan at the time. I was in New York in law school. And so she moved here. And then we, we dated for a while, 5 years before we got together. And then got married, which again, yeah, it's funny. Like a lot of my other friends, so I got married when I was 28. And a lot of my friends didn't get married for like 10 more years, like the long amounts of time. And I didn't realize how I got started so fast on some of those things, but it's great. Like that was probably the smartest thing I ever did.
That's
was
worked out.
Yeah.
And what does she do?
She works for she likes design. She's been in design stuff for a long time.
An artist.
Yeah, but she's approached it from a, she is an artist. She's a great painter, and she does a lot of very cool. Like our house is, it's beautiful. She's really made it lovely, but she likes helping to get very high end furniture or design things into the world. So when I met her, she was working for a company called Baker, which is a very, very fancy, like $20,000 couches kind of place. And she was in their marketing department. And then she moved here and started working for Architectural Digest, which is the big, home design magazine.
Right.
And so she was in the magazine world for a while. And then more recently, she's taken a job with this super fancy fabric company called Pollock and Weitzner. And so she runs their marketing department. And so if you're, like a really high-end interior design person, and you have, I don't know, Madonna as your client, and Madonna's going to furnish your house, and then so you're like, well, here are the options for what the upholstery on your chair, your couch. And chances are it would be this Pollock and Weitzner stuff, and so you can't, like, I can't get it, like you can't get it. I mean, I could probably get it because it's I could just ask Amy, but the average, it's for the design community. So it's, I think it's a perfect gig for her. She's really happy, and we're both kind of doing what we want to be doing with our careers right now, which is a really nice place to be. And it took us both kind of a while to get there, but I think we're
How did your family feel about your comic book for? I mean, you were a lawyer.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, guess what else?
Guess
I
what?
am?
Yeah. Well, it's I phased it out in a very graduated way. Like it wasn't like one day, man, see you later.
Yeah.
It was I didn't shut down the practice until it really looked like I was going to be able to make a serious go of this.
Yeah.
And there's such a difference in my happiness level between writing and law. Like law was always something I'm doing because it's providing it's paying the bills and it's a good lifestyle and it's all of these things. But and I still enjoy having the skills, but like writing, creative stuff just feels so different.
Yeah.
Really does. And Amy could see it, and Rosie was younger, but she could see it too. Like you can tell when your parents are happy or when they're not happy. So I think that if I was struggling along, making indie books that were selling 300 copies, it might be a different story. But
Right.
but I've been really lucky that my work has been able to take me to some really great places, and particularly like selling the novel is a good sign that I'll be able to continue making a go of this for the future. And careers in comics writing don't always last for an extremely long time. Like people, I would say a 5 to 10 year arc of writing superhero stuff is fairly typical. But there's a lot of exit strategies out of it. Like if you have a good reputation as a writer, you can do a lot of different things. I mean, there's TV or movies.
Do you want to do that? Is that next, do you think?
You know, it's interesting. I have a lot of friends who write in TV, and they tell me, you know, it's great. You know, there are a lot of things that are cool about it, but you have to be. The rooms are all in LA. Like I think I don't think the rooms for the Netflix shows are here.
Daredevil is not, I don't think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think yeah, I would have maybe said Luke Cage, but because Chio lives in like Canada or something, or
Okay.
Seattle. He lives in Seattle, but it might be in LA. It might be.
Yeah. I mean, and even if there are a handful here, I think there are a handful for different things. But by and large, you want to be a TV writer, you live in LA,
Right.
and there are some exceptions. Like you can get booked on a shorter show, like say a Daredevil or something like that, which doesn't have the room. The room doesn't run all year; it runs for 4 months or 5 months, I think.
Right.
And so you can do that, and you can commute on the weekends to come back, or things like that, and you can still have a life here in New York. But that would be a big adjustment, especially with Amy having that job she loves here. So it's something I've absolutely thought about.
How about adapt? Are people picking up your creator
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah. Letter 44 was picked up. Curse Words is going to go out soon. The Oracle Year was picked up at the same time as the book was.
So companies are interested in
Yeah.
making it something.
Yeah. So it's really there's a lot of paths. There's a lot of paths open. I don't know which one
Interesting.
is going to be the way to go, but
Maybe Officer Scott could be in
Yes,
all
of
these
course.
projects.
Officer Scott. He's the king. Most important character I've ever made up, for sure.
Oh, quick question about Muse.
Yes.
Is he an Inhuman?
Well, that's a good question.
He looks in.
He could be.
He
He
takes
could
that
be.
mask off at the end, and I'm like, He looks
I originally was gonna define his beginnings a little bit more, like even sort of tell you like where he came from, and then I'm like, you know what? As the story was developing, it just seemed like there's no way I should lock this guy down. He is an agent of chaos. He is, you know what he wants and why he wants it, and that's all you need. And the minute I start being like, here's where Muse grew up, like I should never write Muse
His
again.
dad didn't love him.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that was a really cool story. And so Muse is out there now in the universe.
He's in Inhuman jail. He is in New Adelon. He is hypothetically being held by by Frank McGee and his Inhuman cops, and we'll see. His broken fingers are mending slowly.
Yeah.
And but he's for sure coming back. The response to him was huge.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
And
how can you tell? Like,
well, Twitter and like just sort of, I mean, even to the point of there's fan mail. Twitter is a big one for that. But one of the biggest signs is I've gotten a couple emails from people asking me about elements of his costume, and that's when people are gonna like. I haven't done a show. Yeah, I haven't done a show since October in the States. And so this whole story came out in between now and then, and I have a feeling I'm going to be seeing a lot of Muses. And if so, that's when you know that it's really like worked.
striking a chord.
Yeah. So
Yeah, people are going around and kill lots of people and make art out of them.
that's what the kids love these days. That's what the kids love.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me.
Hey, my pleasure. I hope it was interesting.
It was very interesting. And would you like to plug anything? You want to plug your Twitter or your
Yeah, I mean, I
website
feel
or
like I've done a pretty good job of organically talking about my many books, but my Twitter is just my name, Charles Soule.
with an E.
With an E, yeah. So Charles and then Soule. My website is charlessoule.com. There's not a ton on there, but there's an email thing if you want to send me a note.
You have like blogs and things on there too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There's a blog. That's true.
And your videos of or
Yeah,
your music.
Yeah, there's some songs on there, which is fun. And then I'm on Facebook too. I would say that the easiest way to get me is Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter, and
You're on Instagram.
that's right. I also have Instagram, which I've been doing. That's funny. I didn't even think of that because I'm kind of doing it more for me than as like a plug my books thing. But
People like the Instagram.
they do like the gram. And
IG.
Yeah, and so if you like pretty pictures of places I'm running or whatever, then look at that too.
Which I do.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
You are kind enough to sign some things for me,
Yeah, definitely.
including the comic that I am in that
Yes,
you wrote.
definitely.
And I'll be selling some stuff for a charity in the future. So
Fantastic.
be sure to follow me. All right. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
Good talking with you.
All right.
There you go, Charles Soule. Thank you so much, Charles. Really great talking with you. And everybody should go out and support Charles and buy his comics and read them. And I guess if you need an immigration lawyer in New York, look him up. And I'm sorry if you do need one. That sounds difficult. Okay, so one more time with my plugs at EJ Scott on Twitter, at EJ Podcast, also on Twitter. I'm on the Instagram, EJScott1106. I have a website, ejscott.com. The Running Blind documentary on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon for just $2 or $3. You can rent it or own it. And crowdrise.com/7on7. And I think that'll do it. So go check out my past podcasts. Go subscribe on iTunes. And don't miss any future ones. You will not be sorry if you do subscribe. But you will be sorry if you miss some. Yeah, I thought that'd be smoother. All right. Well, thanks, guys.